Hi, my love. How are you? I know it's been a minute, but this one has really been a challenge for me to think about. We've been talking a lot about, you know, the power of letting go, right? In reference to our emotions first and foremost, but this topic is so layered for me. Um, and maybe you too. Uh, but again, it's just a lot. There's a lot to this cake. So you just stick with me. We'll get started and then we'll kind of work our way through it together, like we always do, safe space and we can be together. And that's really what this space is about. So, um, you know, sometimes I'm asked, how do I move on, right? Just in general. Um, and for me, in my practice, what I do for myself really starts with my emotions and understanding that they are visitors and not permanent residents, right? I think language is important. I think so often we learn to say things like, I am sad, right? And, or I am anxious. And those things are, you're not really, you're not literally, like you are not sad. You yourself, your name is not sadness, right? You are not like the embodiment of sadness. You're not like the physical uh manifestation of sadness itself, right? You are experiencing sadness. And I think that when I really started to use language that way, where I would stop saying things to myself like I am, and started switching them out for I'm experiencing, right? Or I'm feeling. So instead of I am sad, it's I'm experiencing sadness, right? Or I'm feeling sad. And that in and of itself, I think, has shifted my focus from this is something that is permanently a part of me that I so closely identify with into this is something that is temporary. I think it signals to my brain, okay, I am not actually this emotion is not part of me, literally. It is fleeting. It's a visitor, right? It will come and then it will go. And I think that the more that we try and fight our emotions, the bigger they grow. Uh, when we hide something, when we bury it, it kind of festers. Emotions are like children, right? Young children, babies, even, where when they don't get their needs met, when they're not seen or heard, um, they get loud, you know, they get upset. And, there was somewhere I heard once that, your emotions, wherever you feel tension, right, is needing attention. So I think that's the same in regards to this topic. When you feel tense about something, in reference to negative emotions, it deserves to have your attention, your undivided attention, right? And when you ignore and avoid, we have the tendency to push them down and they fester and then they come back tenfold, right? Until they manifest into our lives where they're inescapable, right? We can no longer they show themselves in a way where we can no longer escape them. We can no longer push them down. They're too big and too loud, and too upset for us to really ignore anymore. And I think a lot of that comes with one, the language that we use, right? Not so closely identifying, especially with our negative emotions, and treating them as visitors. Emotions really are teachers, they're not our enemy. And when I started to view my emotions as a teacher, right, there's a lesson there. What can I learn from this? What is this trying to show me? What is this trying to tell me about myself? It became more of a friendly environment. it made it less hostile because I wasn't putting myself in opposition of myself and my emotions and those things, right? We don't get angry at children when they're trying to express their needs, especially babies that haven't learned language yet, right? We don't just try and like shove them down and keep them quiet. We try to figure out what they're trying to say to us, and our emotions are very similar in that way. For those of us that are visual learners like myself, that's kind of how I see it, right? If there was a baby that was in my area and it was crying, I wouldn't just, shove it somewhere and hope that like it would silence, right? I would address the issue, right? And I think you would too, right? If you're here, you definitely would because you've aligned with me, and that's what we do, right? We are good people, and we would try and figure out what the root of that discomfort was, that dis-ease in this child, and we would try and address it. We would try and find comfort. And I think we deserve to treat ourselves that way more often because sometimes we lose sight of that, right? We don't treat ourselves as kindly as we would someone who was innocent or small. And our emotions are that way. Emotions really are teachers and not our enemy. And I think it's important for us to start putting ourselves not in opposition of our emotions, and really just walking alongside them in life because they're going to be there regardless. And they really are there to keep us safe. So that's like the first layer, I think, for me. Um, and again, if that resonates, take it if it does, and no hard feelings if it doesn't. But that really helped me. And then the second part of it is if there really is something there that I feel I have lost or I feel I do identify with, we talk about grief a lot. Grief is one that, hmm, once you've lost something, grief is a regular, it is a reoccurring visitor, right? And that's to be expected. There's no timeline on grief, right? But the same goes for grief that if we're not allowing ourselves the proper space to really give grief the attention that it needs, it is going to get loud. It is going to get ugly. And I think for so many of us, when we experience loss, whether it's grieving the people in our life who have passed over or grieving the living, right? Person, place, or thing, we don't give ourselves the appropriate setting to really sit with that grief. And again, I think we make an enemy out of grief because it's uncomfortable. But really, I think that grief, and this is my personal view, that grief really shows us just how much we have loved something. I don't think we really are certain. I think we might get close to realizing how much we love something when we have it, but it's not until we've lost it, right, that we're very aware of just how much we've loved. Grief is the price that we pay for love. And in my opinion, it's always worth it, right? But if we don't give ourselves the appropriate time and space to really sit and give that feeling the attention again that it needs, right? And not that you have to set a timer because grief again is a reoccurring visitor, right? It'll be with us always. I don't think grief ever really leaves us. So long as you love something and you've lost it, that kind of will always cycle through. We learn a new normal after we've lost something, but really sitting with something and saying, hey, this is the reality of things, and this is just showing me how much capacity I have for love. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm glad I don't feel cold. I'm glad I don't feel empty. I'm glad I'm not numb because it means that I'm capable of love. It means that I have, a huge capacity to accept love, feel love, give love. And that's a beautiful place to be, my love, right? Love, 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 love. But I think that's important. I think these are the two things that I would really, implore you to look at if you are struggling with moving on, right? And there'll never be a place, my love, that we get to where we're going to completely forget, or we're going to completely be, you know, restored to like the original version of ourselves. We're evolving, we're changing, we're going to be adjusted to a new sense of normal and a new sense of ourselves, really, and our own identity, right? And that's wonderful. Uh because you have so much depth now. You have so much seasoning, you have so much sazon. As you walk through these paths in life and learn these lessons, um, it would be so boring to be vanilla, wouldn't it? And now you're all spiced up, and that's really cool. I think that's a really cool thing. And if there is any sense of discomfort, right, or tension, I would really look at these first two places, right? Are you Are you signaling to your brain that you are something that you don't want to identify as in sad, angry, I am frustrated, I am, because your brain doesn't really know the difference. It believes what you tell it. So I would switch your language from something that is less permanent to more temporary, such as I am, to I'm experiencing or I'm feeling, right? That's the first part of it. The second part would be, have you given yourself the appropriate space to grieve properly, right? Are you giving that the attention that it deserves? And are you valuing grief in a way where you're accepting it as love itself, right? Or are you making an enemy out of grief? You know? Um, and then the last thing I guess I would say is I just want to remind you of prayer and meditation, right? I say this a lot, but I'm going to say it for anyone who's new here. Anyone maybe needs a reminder. Prayer is when we talk to God, and meditation is when we allow God to talk to us, right? Or your higher power. Again, we don't discriminate here. Jesus, Buddha, Allah, whoever you believe in, creator for me. My mom gave me that when I first started my spiritual journey, and I hope it helps you, meditation can be big and scary, but for me, I'm not a traditional meditator. I never will be. I don't have any interest currently. I might change my mind about that, but staring at a candle flame for 10 minutes is meditation. It's just mindless behavior. Standing in the shower, which we all do, I hope, right? You better be. Take care of yourself, please. Standing in the shower without listening to music and listening to the water intently for 10 minutes is meditation. Going on a walk and counting my steps without music is meditation. Anything that's mindless, my love, okay? Um, Spirit wants to talk to you. And if you have anxiety, anxiety is us praying. Anxiety is prayer. You're hoping that something does happen or something doesn't happen, and you're putting that out into the universe, to somewhere, to someone, right? To something out there. And if you want clarity, just ask, you know, give me clarity, show me the way, and I'll go. And then you go and get to your meditation. I think that's the final part of it. I think that's the final act in this little trio, in this holy grail that we have, right? Holy Trinity is what I meant to say. Not the Holy Grail. Holy Trinity is what I meant to say, right? Like those three things I think will, at least that's where I'm at in my journey. That is what's worked for me. And when I get asked the question of like, how do I move on, right? Uh, Man, that's a big question, and it's been a big thing for me to think about. And I really wanted to take the time to, and the space really, to appropriately address and give this topic the attention that it needed, right? And I think that's ironic that that's exactly what we should be doing with our emotions and our grief, right? Um, so that's a good way to kind of round this conversation out. Words are spells, my love. Okay, just be careful with the way that you talk to yourself and the way that you talk to your higher power. And if you need clarity, I would really implore you to meditate. The last thing I'm going to say is that we prove to our brains, right, that we don't need those fight or flight chemicals, that we're not actively running from a saber-toothed tiger, we're not actively in danger, our lives are not at risk when we meditate. Even if you can stop and breathe, 4 times in and out deeply, however you'd like, you prove to that part of your brain when you're having those big feelings like anxiety, depression, stress, right? That you're safe. Because you look at your brain and you can say, see, we wouldn't have been able to do that just now if we were actively in danger. If we were running for our lives, you know? So take a moment, take some time, right? To to do that. I hope something in here was helpful. That is always my hope for you. Um, and now, we're kind of the point where I hate to do it to you, but I'm gonna leave now. But don't you worry, my love. I will always be back for you. Okay? I love you so much, and we'll talk soon.